So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and I want to give you my iPhone 17 Pro Max versus iPhone 16 Pro Max 2 months later comparison. Now, I've had this phone for long enough time now that the hype is fully died down at this point. Yes, it's still going to be a hot seller, I think, for the holiday season, but the initial launch wave has been down for quite some time at this point. So I can give you a little bit of a different perspective now. But I want to talk about the very first thing, and that is the price. Do I feel like now that the hype is down, is this phone worth the price? I say yes from a standalone perspective. And now what do I mean by a standalone perspective? I mean that if you don't have a Max phone or you never had one before, you're coming from an Android phone, you're buying a Max now, does this phone offer enough capabilities to match what Apple is charging for it? And I would say yes. The 2 TB option though, that is pretty up there in the price tag. We're looking at around 2,000. So that one I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the entry 256 to 512 gig range. This does give you great cameras, large battery, a very nice display, and overall a very optimized and good performing device. However, is the 16 Pro Max at this point now worth it still at its reduced discounted prices? And the answer is absolutely. I actually think it's a better deal if you could find it on a good bargain or a good price tag, because it is mostly similar to what the iPhone 17 Pro Max offers, but also giving you what I think is still a nicer looking phone overall in terms of the titanium build, the glass back. This phone just feels a little bit nicer overall. So now that the hype is dying down, I'm living with the iPhone 17 Pro Max day to day. I'm kind of over the design already of this device, and I have to tell you what I mean by that. I don't mean that like I think it's a bad design. What I mean is that I miss my iPhone 16 Pro Max's design, and over time, I do think this was the better looking phone here overall. That's just my personal take on it. I do think that over this past couple of months, the plateau hasn't really grown on me. Yes, it definitely has a functional look, but the aluminum is a little bit more slipperier to me than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. The phone actually slipped out of my hands, hit the pavement, and while I do have a very tiny little scuff right there, it's still annoying that it scuffed that easily, but it does feel nice in the corners, but it is a little bit of a slippery product. And generally, the back with the two-tone, some people love it, some people don't. And you can see these antenna lines here. This 5G antenna was integrated within the body of the iPhone 16 Pro Max. I just think the 16 Pro Max looks better, point blank. It not only looks better, it feels better in the hand. It feels like last year's product was more fancy than this year's product. So for me, at this price tag, this feels like they're going for more function. This one, they're going for more aesthetic. And when it comes to Apple products, I definitely always really enjoyed how they were aesthetically just a little bit nicer to me than a lot of the competing phones out there. But this year, I'm not so sure it's really quite that much better than a lot of the competitors. So I kind of want to see, we'll see what they do in the future, but I don't know. Maybe they'll go back to titanium someday. But personally, the design, after a couple of months, I'm kind of missing the 16 Pro Max, if I'm being real with you. But that doesn't mean I don't like my 17 Pro Max. I do like it. I like its functionality, the battery, the cameras. I'm just saying, I just think last year's was a little bit nicer. So let's talk about the weight and ergonomics without talking about all just the specifications. When you pick both of these phones up in the hands, technically the titanium 16 Pro Max is lighter, but these are both very large phones, 6.9 inches. So the general user probably won't even notice any real difference between these two phones right here in the weight. They're both just large, hefty devices. Now, ergonomically though, the iPhone 17 Pro Max, I like the way it feels a little bit better to hold in terms of the aluminum feeling smoother in the palm. It doesn't feel more fancy like I talked about with the build section, but ergonomics, like when we're talking about how it feels in the hand, it is smoother. Again, to me, a little slipperier though, but this is a little less comfortable on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. So my preference is the 16 Pro Max for not slipping out of my hands from an ergonomic perspective, but from a weight and build perspective, that's still going to go to me to the iPhone 16 Pro Max. I just think that the smoother edges are just a little bit more comfortable in the palm of your hand over the iPhone 16 Pro Max. That's basically the only difference I noticed. And when it comes to the colors, I do got to give a quick mention to this though, because the color is definitely way more exciting for this cosmic orange. Now the blue, the silver, those are a little bit but the cosmic orange definitely stands out. And for those of you who are going to say, what do you mean the silver's classic, the silver's amazing, it is nice, but the cosmic orange, and what I mean by this phone stands out. That's something I would like to see a trend continuing on the Max phones. I like to see red. I like to see, you know, maybe a burgundy, maybe another version of a purple or something like that. Just like keep them standing out in the future, because we don't want to see the same old gold and gray and silver every year. That's just boring after a little while. So I'm ready to see Apple continue this trend, maybe even bring a new color in the spring coming up. Let me know your thoughts on that down below in the comments. One of the benefits of the Plateau though is that if you are using this on a desk, this one definitely bounces around a little bit more, especially up at the top if you're clicking apps up there. So that's just something. I don't know how many people actually use their phone on a desk, but it does happen occasionally. Maybe you're, you know, doing something, you know, on the table or whatever, and then you're just gonna tap an app or something. This one just gonna bounce around a little bit more. That's just something I noticed. Now from a display perspective, they kind of have the same exact experience here on the displays, except for the iPhone 17 Pro Max is actually noticeably brighter outdoors specifically, but even in day-to-day, I found it to just be a little bit brighter. So if you enjoy a brighter panel, that is really the only upgrade here coming from the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Other than that, it really doesn't matter which application you're in. They all tend to look about the same. So that's just not a big difference. The anti-reflective properties of the iPhone 17 Pro Max are slightly noticeable, especially if you don't have a bad screen protector on there. You have a decent one. They are noticeable. That is a benefit, but it's kind of like, you know, you don't really notice it unless you're comparing them side by side. It's really just a thing that you have there. But once you use the 16 Pro Max for a while, you probably don't think about this too much. So to me, it's not a massive benefit, but it is a benefit, so I got to mention it nonetheless. Now the dynamic island experience is actually identical. So if we do go and use these phones right here, it doesn't matter. They're both going to have the same exact dynamic island experience, same software, and that's kind of been the same ever since the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So I can't really say that has changed. And that's one of the things I wish that Apple would have changed, was reduced the dynamic island a little bit on the 17 Pro Max, but it kind of just feels like the same exact experience all across the board in display, and the same width of the panels as well, meaning typing is also exactly the same. So a couple months later, when it does come to the software, there is, again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing for every section, but there is no real difference except for if we go into settings and we scroll to camera, you will find a few changes in here, but that's mostly down to the camera hardware changes. But yeah, you'll have a couple of more features in here, but nothing substantial. And the thing is that I will say that the software has ran better on the 17 Pro Max. Usually the iPhone that launches with that particular software tends to run better. There is a couple of delays on some app launches I've noticed since 26 was on my iPhone 16 Pro Max. And the battery life does have to index, so it takes a little bit of time for it to get really good again. But at the end of the day, again, I think the average user is not going to notice any substantial difference. So my upgrade was basically nothing in terms of software going to the 17 Pro Max. Again, I cover these phones for the channel. If I didn't cover these phones on the channel, I probably wouldn't even be using a 17 Pro Max if I was being totally honest with you. Now, from a performance perspective, I do notice that the iPhone 17 Pro Max can hold more applications in the background. It also does much better with cooling under a heavier game play. So if you do have an extended session within a particular game, this is definitely noticeable. However, the iPhone 16 Pro Max I never even thought about performance. I did notice it tends to get a little bit warm up at the top when playing Call of Duty or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's really down to just the RAM benefits for me. That's the main performance benefit I like, because I do multitask quite a bit on my iPhone, and I noticed this thing could just hold everything easily in the background. It's also a bit better with Wi-Fi performance on this phone. In addition to that, this phone does tend to handle heavier loads due to its thermal efficiency. So while I don't love the overall look of the phone a little bit more than the prior titanium models, I definitely do think that the function of the chassis has really come into play in the area of performance. So this part of the phone, to me, offers tremendous value, especially for those of you who are going to use this for the long haul. I mean, 5+ years. This is a good phone for that type of long-term use. Some would say the aluminum shell, though, scratching easily and stuff like that could be an issue, but just put a case on it, you should be fine. So the battery on this phone has been absolutely phenomenal for iPhones. I've been kind of spoiled by the OnePlus 15 lately, giving me even more impressive battery life than this. But this phone right here has been superb. It's actually been noticeably better than the iPhone 16 Pro Max by about an hour to an hour and a half. So it's not like game-changing battery if you had a 16 Pro Max, but it's definitely noticeable. And so 2 months later, I don't really think that this warrants the upgrade because it's still strong battery on the 16 Pro Max. But again, as a standalone product, if you're coming over to iPhone for the first time, you're getting one of the longest lasting battery phones on the market here with the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Except when you start looking at silicon carbon competitors, now we're talking very, very impressive battery. But the 17 Pro Max is no slouch. This thing definitely lasts a full day and then some. So when it comes to the cameras, the thing I really like about the iPhone 17 Pro Max's camera system is all of the lenses are actually the same resolution. They're all 48 megapixel cameras. So that means everything looks identical when it comes to overall quality. So I do really love this. I also like the 8x zoom, but the real game changer to me is to be that front facing camera. This has been super useful, and this is one of those features that you kind of will definitely use quite a bit if you use the front facing camera, group photos, family photos, things of that sort. So this one to me has more long-term value than just a megapixel upgrade. So the front facing camera, the rear matching up to all be very similar. This kind of reminds me of a 13 Pro Max year. Remember when that all had 12 megapixel triple cameras? Everything was consistent. That kind of reminds me of that. Now we can go 5 times, and this is definitely no slouch. This can still zoom 25x, so it's not a problem. But that front facing camera, it's starting to feel a little bit old now on the 16 Pro Max just because they've had it since iPhone 12. This type of camera, 12 megapixel on the front. So this camera to me is the main upgrade. It's the front facing camera. That's also true on most of the 17 models. But not having the exact same resolution on each camera means that you're just going to get a little bit more pro level results on the rear cameras. In the video quality, of course, always going to be a little bit better, but cameras haven't been game changing, but the front facing camera has been for me. I just still find I do like when they're all the same resolution though. So for that reason alone, I have enjoyed this, and I wouldn't want to go back to 16 Pro Max for that reason alone. So when it comes to audio performance, believe it or not, 2 months later, the 17 Pro Max has been a little bit better, about a 2 decibels. I mean, it's small, it's tiny, but I always take what I can get when we're talking about stereo speakers. I mean, the iPhone Air has a single speaker, so when this one's louder than the previous version, I'll take it. That doesn't mean I'm super excited. I think they could do more work in this area to make the phone even boom a little bit louder. That would be pretty impressive if we started seeing much louder speakers for music and stuff of that sort. I don't know how loud they can get it though on a smartphone, but it's only been incrementally getting better over the years, I think, when it comes to the stereo speakers from what I've been hearing. So it's still better though. So definitely a couple months later, I did have to mention audio. I have noticed it sounds a little bit louder than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. But when it comes to the special features, they're kind of the same. They both do have action buttons. They both do have camera control buttons. And generally, these phones kind of do have the same emergency SOS, texting via satellite. So they kind of just feel about the same when it comes to the feature set. So 16 Pro Max users are definitely probably not even entertaining the 17 Pro Max too much when it comes to feeling like they're getting massive feature upgrades. That's something I noticed. Now, phone call quality hasn't been hardly noticeably different whatsoever. I think you'll notice more difference depending on your carrier, whether that's a good carrier or not that you're using. I did notice one thing though. I do feel like the 5G performance is a little bit better on the new 17 Pro Max. I've noticed it's just super fast, in everywhere I go pretty much. And it holds on to that signal strength just a little bit better. Let me X this dynamic island thing out. That has been annoying me for the past several minutes. But yeah, the 17 Pro Max just a little bit better in the connectivity network performance. That's definitely something I do like about it. But as a final verdict, I'm going to be real with you guys straight up. couple months later, now that the hype is over, I think about it. Again, if it wasn't for the fact that I cover products, this is what I do reviews and comparisons, I think I probably would have just skipped the 17 Pro Max as a 16 Pro Max user, but I could probably say that about the 15 Pro Max I had before this one as well. So the truth of the matter is I feel like the real upgrade now that I've had this for a while is coming from people who use maybe down to about 13 Pro Max. You could say 14 Pro Max too, because it doesn't have Apple Intelligence. It's still 6 gigabytes of RAM, but really it's the older Max users who are really going to benefit from this change. The changes are just a little bit too incremental to me from last year. And I think that's by design. Apple's not going to make a phone that blows away last year. I mean, we would probably like that if we wanted a new phone every year, but we know not everybody's buying a new phone every year anymore. But that's my experience coming from this phone, because I tend to stay on the latest version. So I did want to give you the experience of somebody who was on the 16 Pro Max last year and then come over here to the 17 Pro Max. I did go down to the 16 Pro as my primary, but I still use this one for testing purposes and all that stuff as well. So that was my experience changing using this phone over here. And I actually made the 17 Pro Max my main daily now, just because I like the long battery life. But thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you all in the very next episode. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.